Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Georgia, and it is time for the TT Time with Dr. Tarver is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. Welcome to the last day of January. This is our Be Ye Not Discouraged series, which has been focused on barriers to goal attainment. In week one, we discussed removing self doubt. Week two, we talked about removing distractions. Last week, we focused on promoting actual change through clear goals and consistency. And this week, we are going to be discussing how being intimidated by people who we deem to have more of the ers, smarter, faster, bolder, stronger, stops us from being able to set and believe in our ability to attain goals. So we'll also be talking about why we like to be that go-to person at the top of our group instead of being in a group where we may not necessarily be the person who has the greatest expertise in a particular area. This episode is entitled When You Are the One, Working Through Intimidation and Learning to Expand Your Network. So this month I have been dropping a scripture, a word of encouragement, some meditation and tonal things to be looking for. So your scripture for today is 2 Corinthians 12 and 8. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, to that Christ's power may rest on me. Your word of encouragement for this week is, I love myself. I've got what it takes to succeed. Your guided meditation should focus on removing self-doubt and inadequacies, and your tones should be focusing on removing some of these negative energy and kind of negative thought patterns that we may be exhibiting. So let's talk a little bit about intimidation. There are a lot of reasons why we can be intimidated by people and also things. Typically, we like to do things that we're comfortable with. And so when we don't feel comfortable or we don't feel as developed in particular areas, we tend to shy away from them. We engage in comparison behaviors and think, I don't have what that person has. They're more talented, they're more creative. Things happen faster for them. It'll take me a long time to be able to achieve that level of success. And sometimes this comes from us having negative experiences. Maybe we grew up in a family where there was a lot of criticism. Perhaps you had teachers in your early years who were critical of you, who limited you in terms of your abilities. Perhaps you were in a group around some other people and there were people maybe that knew more than you did about a particular subject area, and they let you know that they knew more and maybe made you feel inadequate because you didn't know as much as they did. And that was embarrassing, particularly if you were in a group setting around maybe other peers or in a classroom. Maybe you received a negative evaluation from a coworker or a boss or a peer. I know particularly when we have these evaluations at work that are tied to promotions or raises, or even performance based, when we get that negative feedback, sometimes it can make us feel like we failed. We internalize this as an issue with regard to our character and our ability, with regard to seeing like, hey, this is an opportunity for growth. Maybe when you underperformed in that area, it felt like this failure to you. And so when you made a mistake next time or misstep or realized you weren't maybe trained in something that you perhaps thought you should have been trained in, or there was an expectation that you would have been trained in, even if that training wasn't provided to you. And so then we feel like, okay, well, I'm not worthy. And oftentimes then we'll put ourselves in places where I don't need to try things where I'm not going to be trained in, so I'm not going to attempt this. An abusive partner may have made you question your potential. Oftentimes when people are abusive, they tear us down, so we'll stay there and we won't leave them because we won't feel like we can do better, or that we deserve better. Perhaps you're dealing with some medical issues or some mental health concerns that may be a hindrance to you at this point, or may make have you feeling inadequate or comparing yourself to other people's? You may feel intimidated by them and you don't think you can be as successful because of these things that you're dealing with. Maybe you didn't grow up with a financial background, and so you're not as sure about how to purchase things or keep a budget, or maybe you've got some ADHD and it's hard for you to get distracted, it's hard for you to follow through. Whatever the case may be, typically what ends up happening when we're intimidated is we essentially just do not think that we're enough. We don't have the ability, we don't have the talents, we don't have the skills, and again, perhaps that we're not worthy of having success. So on the other side of that, why we like being at the top. So why do I want to be the person in my group who is the go-to, the one, the greatest of all time, whatever it is that you may see yourself as? And that's because it's comfortable. When you're at the top of your group, when you're the expert in your group, when you're the person that people go to, you're the dependable one, you're the reliable one, you're the smart one, whatever it is that the title has been given to you, is we feel that sense of power and validation. We don't have people that hold us accountable because they think we're experts. So they trust what we say. They tend to pretty much go with our recommendations. We know what to expect. We know how people see us. We know what our role is going to be, how we're going to be viewed. So we don't have that same sense of worrying about being criticized or failing. We have that security that people need us. And a lot of us don't feel like we have purpose and value unless other people are looking to us for things. Because if I don't feel good about myself, I do at least want other people to feel good about me. And so that allows me maybe some sense of wholeness and completion, or so we think, in terms of having that validation. Often there's no competition when we're the top person in our group because, again, we're the top. So other people are striving to be like us, but they may not necessarily be there. And sometimes we'll intentionally pick people who we know don't follow through, who we know aren't going to give us any kind of negative feedback. And so we have this guaranteed win that we don't have to really worry about growing in any way. But what these things do, whether it's intimidation or you're being at the top of your group and so you don't really have anybody to push you to grow, is that you are less likely to reach your goal. And so oftentimes people will say to me, uh, we have these great ideas, or I've only been able to get to a certain level and then I feel like I plateau, I can't go any further. And it may be because of some of these phenomena that we're talking about right now. And so what we want to do is figure out, okay, well, why am I uncomfortable around people of a certain intellect or a certain level of attractiveness or a certain ability to be creative, or, talent, or maybe they have a lot of different business ventures or whatever it may be that we're comparing ourselves to them. Or on the other end of that, again, why do I want to be this top person in my group and don't want to actually be held accountable to really growing and receiving feedback? So let's talk about some strategies. One, this comparison behavior is destructive. We've talked about this in several of the episodes about how comparison, whether it's top down, I'm at the top and I feel like I'm in good shape, so looking at you, I'm not so bad, or bottom up, oh, I don't feel like I'm, good enough. Whatever the case may be, it's important for you to identify goals for yourself instead of focusing on what others think your goals should be. So if I'm working toward, I always tell my clients, compare yourself to you, right? So this is where I started. Here's my goals. We've been talking about goals this whole month, how to set and attain them, clear, concise, realistic goals. So if I set a goal for myself and I see, hey, this is where I started, then really all I need to be tracking is how I'm growing, how I'm working toward and implementing these strategies and these steps that I've outlined. It's important that we look at our opportunities um, for growth within any situation. So even if I perceive it as a failure, there is an opportunity for me to grow. Even if I perceive it as a success, there is an opportunity for me to grow. And so if I look at things as if they are constructive feedback as opposed to personal attacks, then I can perceive them in a different way. It's important that that personal mantra is in place. So regardless of whether you feel like you succeeded at something or there were areas of aspects of something that you could have done better. You're secure in who you are. And that mantra needs to speak to that you have an identity outside of what you do, and who you're working for and with, who you're friends with, who your support system is, because if we attach our worth to people or things, then anytime something shifts with regard to those areas, then it leaves us with a void. But if I'm whole in myself, no matter what happens, then I'll be able to receive that feedback and move forward. And it is also important that we take personal responsibility. A lot of times we blame other people. Oh, well, they're more talented, or they blocked me, or they've got the market cornered. We need to take personal responsibility for our behaviors, which may be like, I didn't even try. I didn't even show up for myself. I didn't make an effort because I didn't feel like I would be able to be on their level. And so, as a consequence of me not showing up, then I didn't have the type of outcome that I possibly could have had, right? So we don't want to be avoidant or blaming. And often when we're intimidated, we're uncomfortable, we tend to just shy away, not try, go into fade into the background instead of thinking, okay, it does not have to be on the level of this other person. It needs to be on my level. And that's when those goals that you have for yourself become really important. What is it that I'm working on? What is it that I have in terms of my mission, my values, my objectives that I'm not measuring for anyone else, I'm measuring for myself. Now, I may not have 5,000 people there. Maybe my goal is I want to have 50. Maybe my goal is I want to have 5. But whatever that goal is, that's what I'm measuring myself against. And also, we talked about last week process versus product. Sometimes it is a journey, and we need to be in that journey, and being present is one of those strategies as well. Let me show up in the right now. Let me ground myself in this present moment instead of being past focused or future focused, because either one of those does not allow me to actually be in the process. So often clients will say, well, I don't like this step. Like, I don't feel like I'm doing anything of any value right now. And it's because I'm asking them to work on themselves, to work on their affirmations, to work on their negative self-talk. And they want to skip ahead to this final outcome because, again, they have based their productivity on either being connected to a thing or a title or another person. And so they don't deem themselves as important or valuable. So they find it incredibly difficult to focus on their own personal growth before they take next steps. But as we discussed, you have to have that small goal of being able to be whole within oneself, to love oneself, to be able to have worth before you're able to deal with these other things. Because what's going to happen when you get that negative feedback? What's going to happen when not the amount of people that you planned for show up, right? This is going to have a negative impact on you. And here comes the negative self-talk. And now I'm shut down and, oh, I can't do that anymore. See, that's why I don't try. So oftentimes we are wanting to skip ahead instead of being in the process. Like, there's no way to cheat. You have to go through all of the steps, which is why it's important for us to understand, feel, and express our emotions and learn how to manage them in healthy ways. People will tell you, get rid of your emotions. I tell you that's impossible. Those emotions are there. They're going to come out in an unhealthy way if you don't attend to them. So instead of running from them, learn how to, you're going to feel jealousy, you're going to feel insecurity, you're going to experience fear, you're going to experience inadequacy, and you're going to experience anger. You're going to experience joy and hurt, and you're going to be excited, right? You're going to experience all of those things. And so it's important to learn how to manage them. So when you're in a situation where something unexpected happens, then you're not reacting, you're able to respond in a healthy way. That being said, you are going to be embarrassed. There is going to be something that you forgot, someone you forgot, something that you didn't do, a detail that's really important, a misquote, a misstep. You're going to misspeak some information. But learning how to allow yourself to experience and work through embarrassment so you're not so terrified that you're going to experience it, that you avoid it, and then you can't recover when it happens. I will tell people all of the time, if you're in your head so much about, oh, I don't want to be embarrassed, oh, I don't want to be embarrassed, you're going to be forgetful because, again, you're not in the present moment. So if I'm not worried about being embarrassed and I allow myself to experience all of the things that come along with setting any goal, planning any event, working toward anything, then I'll be able to, one of my favorite words from this weekend is pivot. I'll be able to pivot, right? And so I won't be trapped or boxed in. That leads us to surrender, relinquish control. A lot of times we like to be that head person in that group because we have control. We think, okay, well, that means I can anticipate every potential outcome. I can be prepared for everything that's going to happen because I'm an expert in this area and I already know what to do. That does not allow you to grow. And it sets up this false expectation that you'll be able to control everything in your life. You won't. There are going to be a lot of things outside of your control, and being able to relax, surrender, and be in the moment of releasing things is a very important part of growth. Small steps are really going to be how you get to any goal and outcome. And so within those small steps, and we talked about last week being realistic, you want to do things that engage your natural talents. So when we are feeling intimidated, it is often because we don't feel like we're talented in an area. Again, that goes back, speaks to the worth, or I'm not as talented as this other person is. The reality is we all have talents. And so if I engage them and utilize them and walk in them, that is going to allow me to be comfortable over time because I'm being me, right? So I'm not pretending to be somebody I'm not. I'm not trying to impress people. I'm not trying to be a maverick. And so in every situation, I'm maneuvering and doing something different. That is not only exhausting, but it definitely isn't anything you're going to be able to maintain. So be you. It is important now we have a support team. And when we identify support, we don't just need people who are going to be like, yeah, you're breathing amazing. Look at you. You better take those breaths, right? We want people who are also going to be constructive. We want people who are confident. We want people who are able to give us feedback. Feedback is an important part of growth. And one of the reasons we have a hard time with receiving feedback is because we take it as a personal attack. Oh, you're saying something negative about my character or my person. And I can't hear, like, oh, hey, this is actually an area where I can improve. And here are some strategies that this person has given me to help me be able to improve. So when you're picking your team of people, yes, you need to have people on your team who are where you want to be, who are doing things that you want to do, who maybe are people that it's not even possible to get to their level, but it is definitely worth the journey of trying, right? Also, it's really important to have a loving relationship with yourself along this journey because you're going to need to challenge that negative self-talk and replace it with healthy counter statements. Negative self-talk is automatic. You have to be very intentional about adding positive things. That's why affirmations are so important. And I encourage people to do daily affirmations. And yes, I understand that you don't believe them at first. And you think they're just stuff you're writing on paper or that people say. But I will encourage you in the way that I've encouraged you in other episodes. If you do not believe it, you can't behave it. And so in order for me to believe it, I have to practice it. So the more you practice it, the more it begins to replace some of these very outdated negative core beliefs that you have with positive, more accurate core beliefs. And I cannot underscore, of course, you know, I could not leave an episode without putting a shout out for counseling. Sometimes you're going to need to work through these things with a mental health provider because us being intimidated by other people or that need to kind of be at the top can be things that are reflective of some deeper wounds that we may need to address before we're able to reach our goals. And then you all know that I think it's important for everyone to have some kind of anchor, whether that's faith or a universal belief in the humanity of people and our connection to the earth. But it is important that you have that anchor because that's going to be your guide through your journey. It is my sincere hope that through this series, you have learned a lot of things about yourself that you can apply that are going to allow you to be able to reach your goals in the future. In February, we are going to be talking about relationship dynamics, particularly unhealthy patterns in relationships, learning to love ourselves and have a good relationship with ourselves, how to make friends and be able to connect with people and sustain those friendships, and also to have the type of healthy dating relationships that we want to have. So, thank you for joining in our January episodes. Be well. We'll see you in February.